Welcome to the John Harrison Podcast. Do you realize that 70% of people are disengaged at work? I don't think it's an overstatement to call that a tragedy, actually, because it affects the bottom lines of organizations, certainly, but it has a negative impact on all the people that work there, and their families, and the community at large. Nobody's talking about this. Well, on this podcast, we are going to talk about it. So welcome back to the John Harrison Podcast. And this episode, we're going to talk about one of our 9 expectations. So when we are doing leadership training, employee training, we go through a series of 9 expectations broken out by VIP, values, informed, and passionate. And it's really kind of the heart of what we believe leaders need to understand. And employees, same thing. So one of those 9 expectations is called Know Your People. And I right away always tell people, know your people. I'm not supposed to be best friends with all the people that work for me. And that's why it's not called Be Best Friends with All Your People. But know your people means folks are different. And we think of the things that are on the surface. We think race and age and gender, things like that. But my lead into this is always, I'll ask the audience, does anybody have more than one biological child here? Or siblings? And they raise their hands, because most of the team people raise their hands, and I'll go, are your kids different? And they always go, oh my God, oh, they're so different. And I'm like, okay, so same genetics, same DNA, same rules in the house, and you'll go, my son is so different than my daughter or whatever. So that means, of course, that your people at work are going to be even dramatically more different than that because they've been raised differently, et cetera. So that's what we're going to talk about today, the value of that, knowing that as a leader. So I've got my good friend Obatayo with me today, and I couldn't think of anyone better to have this discussion with. So just if you could just start off, kind of tell us your story and how you got here, and our audience will be blessed by that, I know.
Thank you, John. Thank you for having me today. I mean, it's been a wonderful and interesting journey. You know, I'm originally from Benin, West Africa. It's a very small country in the western Gulf of Africa. There is to the west of Nigeria.
Okay.
Used to be about 9.5 million people in 2012 when I left. And I think it's reaching about 11 million people today. Wow. Growing up, it was a kind of different experience from what I encountered here.
Sure.
And very briefly, when I came to the U.S., I attended Henderson State University in 2012. And
how did you get to Henderson State?
Well, that's an interesting story.
Okay.
It was a friend that I went to school with back home. We went to college together, and I had lost touch with him.
Mm-hmm.
And one day he came back home on vacation, not knowing that he had been in the U.S.
Okay.
And we met on campus for an event, and he said, well, I've been in the U.S. If you're interested, you should come.
Mm-hmm.
I've been in Arkansas, Arkansas. There's some wonderful people there. They drink something called sweet tea. You should come, and
now let me just say something, because I grew up near Chicago. I had never known about sweet tea either.
Really?
So even in America, I was the same as you.
Yeah, commonality there. Yeah. So long story short, I ended up giving him my papers and application, and it had kind of been a dream of mine. Mm-hmm. to attend the United States, to come to the United States and live here. And that's been a talk that I had been having with my dad, continuing education.
Okay.
And I think to put things in context, I feel like I need to talk about 3 key events.
Okay, of course.
Number one, it's my dad, waking me up at 5 a.m. in the morning,
mm-hmm.
Telling me no man sleeps past 5 a.m. I mean, and it was waking you up like with spanking.
Not softly.
Not softly. You need to be up. You need to be doing something, cleaning the house.
Did you have siblings?
I did have siblings,
okay.
But I was the oldest.
Okay.
So he used me as an example to teach this lesson to my siblings.
Okay.
You have to be out walking the dogs, watering the plants, and getting up. At the time, I didn't really get an appreciation for it because I hated it.
Of course.
And I borderline hated him too for doing that to me. But in 2012, actually in 2013, after I had been here for a year, and he came to visit, we both sat down and we cried because I told him, Dad, thank you for the discipline for waking me up at 5 a.m. Because now this is what has helped me. That discipline.
Yeah.
To be prepared, to be waking up early, to study and learn the English language. Because when I came here, I spoke French. And passed the TOEFL in 6 months, with the highest score they had ever seen at Henderson State University, which was humbling, but also a good accomplishment.
Of course.
So we sat down and we cried. The second event that I would like to talk about is a field trip that we took in my country to a village, where people didn't have access to clean water. Mm-hmm. At the time I was studying civil engineering because the plan was to work with my father, who was an architect at the time.
Okay.
I would be the engineer working with him. We will open a firm together, and on that field trip, being so close to where we lived, because we lived in Cotonou, the capital of my country, seeing that people did not have access to clean water.
How far was it from your town?
About 35 miles.
Mm-hmm. Dramatic difference.
Close, far, but still close.
Of course.
And the people in the village, they had built a dam to retain rainwater. Mm-hmm. And that was their source of water. And it was a field trip. We visited there, and at one end of the pond, that's what I call it, because that's basically what it is. It was almost green water. There were some women washing their clothes in the water. And on the other side of the pond, I see a gentleman with a bottle. He sticks the bottle in the water and drinks it. And that was so shocking to me.
Of course.
And when I got home, I told my dad, I don't think we'll follow through with the civil engineering plan. I need to switch to water resources engineering.
Wow.
And learn how we can bring access to clean water to these people.
Basic human need.
Basic human needs. And thereafter, the third event, which is key to what led me to come in here in the United States as well, along with the story of my friend that I told you earlier, is my research advisor when I was finishing my engineering degree back home. He's the one who mentioned North Carolina State University.
Okay.
And all the good research that people were doing, the professors were doing at NC State. So I had that in the back of my mind, and that was the only graduate school I applied for too.
Okay.
And I was accepted. It was an exhilarating day,
yes.
And I went through there in 2014 is when I started and completed a master's degree in 2016 over there.
Wonderful.
So, and along the way, I met my wife at Henderson State University 6 months after I moved here. Okay. And we now have two wonderful children, Sam, who's 6 years old, and Ruby Claire, who's 3 years old.
Love it. So, some of you are listening to that story going, well, my story is not as interesting as that story, because that's a pretty amazing story. But I think, when my wife and I when we go to a restaurant, sometimes the waiter or waitress will say, Are you from Arkansas? And I'll go, no, we moved here in 2009 or 8. And they'll say, from where? I'll say, Tokyo. And they'll go, Tokyo? Right. Oh, you must have been in the military. I go, no, not the military. And they might say missionary. But in about a minute, they kind of hear our story. And they'll ask if we have kids and all this. And then, do you still work at Caterpillar? No, I left, and because I had this calling to go help people. So, and usually the waiter or waitress, I'll say, well, what's your story? And they'll go, well, it's not as interesting as that. And I'll go, what do you mean? Well, my family's lived in Central Arkansas for 150 years. I go, well, that's an interesting story. Right. So really everyone has, an interesting story, I think. And now, as a leader, people sometimes feel reluctant to find out, inside information, so to speak, about their employees. And I will say that sometimes I've had supervisors say, well, there's a person that works on my team, and he doesn't want to talk about anything personal ever. Okay, then don't force that. Yeah. Don't put them in an uncomfortable position. But most people, as you get to know them, like just someone hearing your story, I've got 100 follow-up questions for you about your story. But that's not the purpose of today. But So you recently took on a new leadership position, new team of people. So how did you get to know them? And what was the value for you in getting to know them?
Yeah, that's a great question. And like you said, people are stories. Ultimately, at the core of our being, we are stories because our experiences, our stories are what have shaped our perception of life.
That's right.
Because that's all it is. It is our perception of life.
Yes,
No,
that's right.
no one knows enough to be a pessimist.
That's right.
But going back to my team, it's about, let's say, fully staffed. We're almost 90 people, so that's a lot of people to get to know.
That's
you know.
right.
But my leadership style ultimately can be summarized in this: it's firm but flexible.
Okay.
Because firm because there are guardrails. We were hired to do a job. There are performance guardrails. Expectations, clear expectations. But within those guardrails, we also have to be flexible because we are talking about human beings, and
Not machinery, not
machinery, and mistakes are gonna happen because ultimately humans may not be the mistake, but mistakes are human. Mistakes are human.
That's right.
So that's one thing I keep in the back of my head when dealing with my team, and it's talking to them, listening to them, because when you become a leader, I think the fear that I had, it may not have been a fear that I voiced openly, but are you adequate enough for this role? How will I appear to my team? But at some point, I had to put that voice that kept telling me that thing aside and listen.
Yes.
Because that group of people, I had worked with them in the past because that's actually where I started at the utility where I worked. I started on the field, which is another whole story, another experience, working on sewer lines and holes, things I had no idea of ever existed. So that kind of gave me an opportunity to bond with those guys.
Sure.
And learn what they do, learn who they are, learn what makes them tick.
Yes.
What are they passionate about?
Frustrations, passion.
What frustrate them,
That's right.
And I kind of took that and held on to that. And now that I'm in this leadership role where I'm now, leading them, that guides the decisions that we make as we try to navigate those difficult decisions that inevitably happen.
That's right.
I've been in the role for 10 months, and I have 3 direct reports, and I deal with them on a daily basis. I deal with everybody else occasionally.
Sure.
But through these guys knowing what their strengths are, I know I have one person who's what you can call a worker bee. He gets things done.
Yes.
He's not about the fluff.
Yes.
Yes. He gets things done. He's very focused. Deadlines, and that's a strength that I have to be mindful of when I try to approach him with assignments. I know he will get it done. He'll take the ball to the end zone for me.
That's right.
And knowing their families, I think that's another thing that we don't usually focus on, because people are their families. The connections that they have with the families, the parents, the children, the siblings, all those shape who those people are. And one thing that we focus on at work is, of course, safety.
Yes.
You come to work in one piece, I want you to go home in one piece. Why? Because there's the picture of your family.
People are waiting.
There are the people that matter the most.
That's right.
That's why you come here.
Yeah, I've always thought about that, Obatayo, because you can hang banners up that say, "We want 0 injuries" or whatever. And we actually at the Caterpillar plant here, we had a whole wall that said basically why I want to be safe, something like that. Right. And people brought in pictures. Right. And it would be their parents or their kids or their dogs or I mean, like they were like, these are people relying on me to come home safe.
Right.
So yeah, I love that. So even your 3 direct reports are different.
Yes.
Different strengths, different how they process information, how they embrace change, and I think the point of that is, and I used to hear this at Caterpillar, the phrase "my way or the highway," and it sounds nice. It's it's quick and it rhymes and it's kind of a cute little sentence, but it doesn't work because in effect what it's saying is, I need you all to think like me, again, embrace change like me, really have my same experiences, and or even simpler than that, just be me. If you can just be a mini version of me, this is going to go so smoothly. Well, that's 100% impossible.
Yeah.
And just if I had never met you before today, and when you just told me your story, I can already think of things that I know might appeal to you, or I might be able to help motivate you. There could be other things that I think that you may not have had experience in this, so maybe that's not the right way for me to come to you. And I understand some people listening to this today that say, well, I don't want to do that. That seems too much work to really get to know people like that. And I always say, even going through all of our 9 expectations, if people don't want to do those, that doesn't mean they're bad people.
Right.
But they might be in the wrong job.
Right.
Because if you think you can just put a goal up on the wall and expect people to get it, it's never going to happen.
Yeah.
It's going to be a struggle.
Yeah, I think as a leader, you have to get to, at least myself, in my experience, I've worked on getting to a point where I can rely on my team because I know their strengths, and I pride myself on fighting to create an environment where things can be said.
Yes.
There is a what's that expression? Check your emotions at the door.
Yes.
Before you come to work.
Mm-hmm.
But what that expression tends to put aside and forget is that people are emotions.
Of course.
Things happen, and we react to them. That's why I love the term that you coined, which is peeling back the onion.
Mm-hmm.
We are layers upon layers.
That's right.
Of emotions, of intricacies.
Yes.
And if you don't know, if you don't listen, if you don't pay attention to those different details, you will miss out on a lot of opportunity. Because the reason why I love leadership so much is because it's rewarding. Mm-hmm. When you sit back and see all the things that you learn and the input that I get from my people, it's the most rewarding thing ever that I have done so far, and it goes beyond work.
Of course.
Because I say we each of us is a leader in our own right.
Yeah.
We lead our lives to specific destinations based on the choices that we make, but we also lead our teams if we are fortunate enough to be in a leadership role.
And you've got people leading families. And
right.
Yes, and I love that. Check your emotions at the door, because that sounds cute to say that.
Yeah.
And again, people might think in the extreme, well, I've got a person, they're just all day long it's about their emotions. Okay, well, that's different.
Right.
We need to deal with them if they're overly emotional.
Right.
But to think that people don't bring that, like the phrase, I don't bring my home life to work with me. I've heard people say that. The correct phrase they should say is, I don't talk about my home life at work. They are bringing it with them.
Right.
It's right here in their chest all day long. Or people say, I don't take my work home with me.
Right.
Probably the better statement is, I don't talk about work when I go home.
Yeah.
And I physically might not take work home and work on it at night, but any frustration, stress, deadlines, you had a difficult conversation with somebody, you're bringing that home.
Yeah.
Even if you don't talk about it.
Yeah. I think I have a recent example talking about emotions that I've dealt with at work, and it was on the tail end of a disciplinary action that we had to go through with a few employees. Okay, and as you can imagine, those brought out some very strong negative emotions.
Of course.
And ultimately, one of these employees, as a result, ended up making a comment, that was borderline, not you would want to say,
Of course.
you know.
Inappropriate.
Inappropriate,
Yes.
you know. And, you know, I talked to his direct supervisor, who's my report, about it, because he made the comment to me, you know, and I said, well, I think we probably need to sit down and talk to him and tell him, you know, here's our perception of what you are saying.
Yes.
You know, I don't know how much details I can go into,
But making sure it was clear, like that the person understood when you said this,
Right.
this is how we received it.
Right.
This is how we are taking that.
right. You know, and I told him, I understand your frustration. I understand the bitterness that you may be feeling from this decision that came down. But you have to recognize that, number one, you made a choice that led to this decision. You led some team members in that choice,
That's
and
good.
that decision applied to all of them. But if you need a scream box in my office, I'll give it to you. And you can yell, you can scream, you can let it out.
Safe place.
Safe place. But ultimately, this bitterness that you are hanging on to is not good for you.
Yeah, not good for their physical
It's-
health,
it's-
emotional health, family, everything.
And you're taking that home,
Yes.
you know.
That's right.
And I want you to come to work and realize that we have your back. We'll work with you. You know, and what I'm trying to do there is create that trust relationship.
You bet.
Because we talked about connection.
Yes.
If I don't trust you, I'm not going to follow you.
Of course.
You know, and it's important, despite all the difficulties that come through, all the difficult situations that we deal with, that people know that I have their backs, that they can trust me to make what's the right decision. They may not be happy about it, you know.
Well,
but
it's like you talked about your dad.
right,
At the time, you could go, this guy is being unreasonable.
Right.
That I get up at 5 a.m. and I don't like it.
right,
I don't like this, that, or that. I mean, but later, you had a different perspective. Because over time, you saw your dad, and this is how I felt about my parents. We got discipline in our house, but we also got a lot of love.
oh, right,
And I think I tell leaders all the time, first of all, you may have people joining your team who only got half of that equation. So you can't even as a leader say, well, when I was a child, or my house, well, maybe they only got love in their house. And they were told they were awesome, and man, we have your back, and you know, your mom and dad just think you're fantastic, and material things, but no discipline. Well, that's going to be a difficulty when they get into the workplace.
right,
Maybe they only got discipline, and maybe that discipline included extreme physical discipline
right,
and no love. And again, I might have supervisors, managers say, well, it's not my job to be these people's parents. I can't help what happened to them when they were young. I agree.
absolutely,
But here's your chance, like you said, with boundaries and with performance expectations, that maybe that conversation you have with that person might change their life. And I totally get it when people say, I don't want to do these things. But I think you're missing it. If you don't, I get not wanting to do it, but if you have chosen to be a supervisor or a manager and you say, I don't want to know my people, and I just want to write them up and hope that things get better, I think you're missing it. And that's what I love. Like that, people might also say, well, I don't have time for those conversations because I'm busy.
right,
But a 15-minute conversation might save you 15 hours,
right.
if that makes sense.
Yeah, as a leader, my job is people.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I say
Because if there were no people, I wouldn't be a leader.
that's right.
You know.
Yeah, we have in our sessions we talk about, we do a little discussion about Chick-fil-A, and the owner and founder of Chick-fil-A, who has since passed away, but he said, we're not in the chicken business, we're in the people business.
Right.
Well, that's true for every business generally.
Right.
And we spend usually the least amount of time on it. Most people don't get trained on how to deal with people. So in our sessions, we try to talk about these 9 expectations are all centered around people. Some of it's how to have difficult conversations with people.
Right.
We don't learn that in college. We don't go to difficult conversation class. I didn't. Just understanding human emotions. Even one of the things we do under Know Your People, that right now, of course, it's very trendy to talk about generations.
Right.
Well, the millennials, they're clearly, pain in the butt, and the baby boomers and the we don't subscribe to that really. We talk about people's upbringing, which you just did, instead of just the year they were born. What was their upbringing like?
Right.
Societal things that happen to people. People have been, my parents went through World War II in Korea, and it could be genocide in a country, right? In Rwanda. I mean, don't tell me that's not going to affect people. It can be COVID. It can be these societal things. So we try to go about that a different way too, because I think it's too simple to say a person was born this year and that's how they act.
Right.
Because there's people, and you just talked about it, people that grew up in your country, 30 miles away, they could have been the exact same age as you. And they went, well, no, they're going to act the same because they're both 20 years old, and they grew up 30 miles apart. They'll be exactly the same. And you're like, it couldn't have been any more different.
Right.
Yeah, I love that.
Their view is different.
Yes.
Their perspective is different. Their experience is different. And that's kind of I think the lesson that I try to keep in the back of my head, because there are the folks that I work with, they have things that make them tick.
Yes.
I have a lot of people who like fishing, who like the outdoors, being outdoors, and those people, you have to realize what are those strengths. Some of those guys don't like office jobs.
Of course. They'd be miserable.
They'll be miserable.
You could pay them $20,000 more a year and they'd be miserable.
Right. So those are the things that we have to be aware of.
That's right.
When we try to know what our team is strong in and where they can fit in the organization. That's right.
Well, Obatayo, I could talk to you for 8 hours, but I don't know if our listeners would hang on that long. But I'm telling you, you know how I feel about you as a person, as a leader, and thanks for sharing your personal story with us, but also just as a leader of a new team, like some of the things you've been through. So like always, this is a quick view of kind of some of the things we do, but if any of you have quick questions on things that we've talked about today, you know how to reach us. If anybody or new leaders or managers and you want to talk to Obatayo, we can get you his information too. But thanks for sharing with us today. I know what you've said has helped some people out there today, so I appreciate that. But stay tuned for future episodes of this. We just try to be from the real world and just talk about real life stuff here. So we hope it's helping you. If you have comments, questions, ideas for future episodes, let us know that too. But it's an honor to be reaching all of you people today like this. But again, thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, John. I appreciate it very much. And thanks for everything you're doing.
You bet.
The world is a better place with you here.
Oh, thank you so much.
Thanks for listening today. If you have any questions or thoughts about today's episode or even ideas for a future episode, you can contact us through our website at johnharrisonvip.com or follow us on any of our social media platforms.